On Rockfin or RJ?
We're going to be on Rockfin soon. We still have to figure out some back end details. But this is my first Rockfin stream.
Yeah, we're gonna be on YouTube and Rockfin. It just takes a little while for it to connect to Rockfin, but I'm about to click it right now. All right, we are live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about, how Biden has been bad with workers. We're going to talk about what's going on in Colombia, and we're going to talk a little bit about some Black Panther history. And we have some special guests here today. And first time on the show, we have RJ of the Fred Hampton Leftists. I'm really honored to have him on. First Fred Hampton Leftist member to be on the show. RJ, it's a pleasure to have you on, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be on your show. I've seen you a lot on the timeline. I've watched some of your videos, so I'm just happy to be here to spend some time with you.
Yeah, so since this is your first time, you can go ahead and let us know a little bit about Fred Hampton Leftists and what it is that you do on that podcast.
So Fred Hampton Leftist started really a couple months ago, with Rome, with Nick, with Jackie, with JB Font, and with Compton J and myself. We really all came together because we all knew we have something valuable to bring to the table. And especially being as black leftists, when there's not many black leftists in the independent media space, we really wanted to put our talent together to display what we bring to the table politically. So my show is been rebranded as Revolutionary Jargon. You can check it out Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I mostly do political education. So our latest videos was really about the first video was about MPP. The second one I did with Margaret Kimberly discussing the Black Agenda. I did one with Danny Highfunk from the Black Agenda Report. We talked about China as well. And one of my favorite ones that I did with my man EQ, we talked about anarchism. So I really like to dabble in different parts of the left, different ideologies, different strategies and policy issues as well, because I think it's important right now, since really electorally we have a lot of free time because the next national election isn't until 2022. I believe it's important for the left really to discover our own potential and to really work hard to better our future instead of just waiting. And for Compton J, he does more talk show style. He brings guests on to talk about different topics. That's pretty important as well. Nick, he brings a lot of people on. He had another Washington, D.C. protester. I forgot her name, but she was on there.
Mm-hmm.
Sky Daddy, she's another important guest as well. Jackie, our black woman leftist, she rocks. She has a show called Nerdologics, where she combines nerd culture
Yeah.
as well as politics. So you should check that out. She does all the MCU, Marvel, DC comics, all that type of stuff. You check that out as well. And as for Rome, he's always on the timeline. He's making short videos. He's always out there on the ground doing organizing. So you should check him out there. And I think I covered everyone. And that's basically what we do at Frampton Left is we keep it real. We don't bullshit you. We cover the facts as they go along, and we really try to educate you. And a lot of times we learn something after every episode. So you should check us out.
Damn, yeah, what a dream team. We got all these hard hitters. I've seen a lot of you guys before, like you guys all got together like on the timelines and stuff, or some of you guys had like channels. I know Nick had his channel Socialist MMA. Rome with his short videos. Yeah, you guys are starting off really strong. I want to see you guys grow a lot. You guys are doing really great work over there. I've checked out your content. You bring up a lot of great solutions on there. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this panel. And we also have here Fuzz the Fair and Skeptical Mantis. What's up, guys? We can start with you, Fuzz. You can go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself to the people.
Howdy, everybody. I'm Fuzz. I'm a Marxist Leninist. I've within the last year, I've started getting really interested into Black Panther history, and myself, Skeptical, and Franco are part of a Black Panther study group where we hope to apply some of the stuff that we've learned into the show today. I normally read communist and lefty texts on Twitter and interpret the neatest parts that I find the most interesting. And yeah, that's me to a nutshell.
Yeah, go ahead, Skeptical. Let everybody know what's up.
Hey, what's up? My name is Mac. I got a channel called Skeptical Mantis, Channel 10. I talk about Black Panther history, communism, revolution. I interview people on the streets about all different kind of topics, whatever they want to talk about. I want to make a revolution. We need a revolution. Otherwise, US imperialism is going to destroy the world. And it already is. So we need to fight back. That's what I'm about.
Hell yeah, man. We see the US's tentacles, the US empire's tentacles extending over at Gaza, extending over at Colombia. I'm going to have two guests on tomorrow, two separate segments to talk about what's going on in Gaza. I had my own solo video about it, but it's a really important topic. Today, we're going to talk about another place that the US's tentacles are extending in, which is Colombia. But real quick, we're going to get started on what's going on here in the States. And, you know, imperialism didn't go away. Fascism didn't go away. Joe Biden is being just as bad, in my opinion, as Donald Trump is. And I think RJ here agrees, because I'm pulling up some tweets here that he's been sharing over on his timeline. So let me show this for everybody here. So this is Joe Biden. He said, we're going to make it clear that anyone collecting unemployment who is offered a suitable job must take the job or lose their unemployment benefits. Would love to hear him define what a suitable job is. And then at JB Font said, so if you're doing better under unemployment and you're offered a job that pays less, you're supposed to take the offer that makes your circumstances worse because... Yeah, and it makes no logical sense, right? And then here's another thing. Heather Long tweeted this out, said, Biden vows to enforce the UI laws. No one can game the system to get paid not to work. We're going to make it clear. Anyone collecting unemployment who is offered a suitable job must take the job or lose the unemployment benefits, said Biden. And then RJ said, this is by far worse than Trump in any apples to apples scenario. So what do you think, RJ? Is Biden, in your opinion, all around worse than Donald Trump, or do you think it's just in some aspects, or it just doesn't even matter? Like we should not stand for this. We should be calling his ass out. But I mean, I don't think there's enough of it. I covered 2 days ago about how there's not enough negative coverage on Biden. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts in general is that it's a little bit more nuanced. You know, some things that Biden does are better than Trump, so I can't just blatantly say that. But what I can say in that scenario you're talking about, excuse me, of the unemployment insurance, is that, let's get it straight. Trump and Biden don't really actually give a fuck about working class people, but Trump knew that, hey, if I give people money and shut them the fuck up, they'll vote for me, they'll be off my back, and I don't have to worry about them. Biden himself is just a standard Republican, even though he calls himself a Democrat. He doesn't care. You know, if the big industry, if the corporation said, hey, we need workers, they're not taking our shit anymore. They're not coming to our shitty job with no pay, with very little pay, very little benefits. Uncle Joe is going to come out there and say, hey, y'all got to work or I'm going to take all your pay away. And so really it's disgusting. You know, it's just like JB said, why would you as a worker, an American worker, work at a job that's less pay and less benefits when they're paying you better to stay home? I'd probably do the exact same thing. And so this is a problem we have in America. You know, this is totally something different. This is a complete 180 from Franklin Roosevelt versus Biden. FDR, he created a federal jobs program, employed people to work, allowed themselves to have better pay for their families. And here comes Uncle Joe just going to strip benefits away during a recession, you know, and it's just ridiculous. And that's kind of my opinion on that.
That's absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, that's what we were promised, is that we were going to get FDR. Is that what we got, Fuzz? Did we get FDR?
No, and I'd argue that Biden is a more efficient practitioner of fascism than Trump is, because he actually has the media on his side with I believe, a 64% approval rating as of a couple weeks ago. That
almost 70.
Shows him that nothing has fundamentally changed, like in reality, but somehow Biden is the more appropriate face to continue it.
Yeah, Mac, what do you think?
If people were paid much better, they'd be more willing to work. I think capitalism can tend to breed, I don't even want to call it laziness, but lack of motivation, because people are smart. You know, who the hell is going to want to go back to a job and take less money than you were getting on unemployment? I myself had the most money that I ever had when I was just collecting unemployment throughout the pandemic. Honestly, when I was working my ass off, as I am right now, and I did in the past, I never had as much money as I had from unemployment. And that's pretty crazy. It's very demoralizing, you know?
Yeah, and about that too, just to add to your point, if you look at the unemployment benefit, in which like during COVID, okay, uh, those who are deemed essential workers or in general, they had more money under the evil fascist dictator Trump than Uncle Joe wearing aviator sunglasses looking ice cream under Biden in his presidency. I mean, how do you go from 600 unemployment benefit down to 3 or 200? Like it's just ridiculous. It's just amazing that we haven't really rose up in general to fight back against this. Because imagine if Donald Trump only threw you 200 extra. I mean, there'd be riots in the street. And so what it proves to me is that you have some individuals who are more just aligned partisan hacks, only want to root for their team as long as the orange idiot is out of office. And you really have to be more smart in general. Like, no, I'm not saying vote for Trump to keep the unemployment. I'm saying at least fight better for whoever is in office to get what you want. Because at the end, it's not red versus blue. It's the U.S. machine you have to fight against. It's top versus bottom.
Hell yeah, 100%, man. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's what you put up in a tweet recently as well. So let me share this for everybody. So you said Trump equals $600 federal unemployment benefits, Biden $200 federal unemployment benefits. States under Trump were pressured to keep unemployment benefits. States under Biden now want to eliminate this to force you to work at poverty wages. Why are we letting this shit happen? Exactly. There should be maximum public pressure right now. We should be just as outraged as the Colombians are, which we're going to talk about. But somebody tried to give, I guess, a devil's advocate here. You're somebody at NJ's Most Wanted, Brother Art, said Trump had zero to do with the $600 unemployment benefits. That was 100% Bernie Sanders. I will not say that it's 100% Bernie Sanders. I will say that it was also the public that was pressuring Donald Trump. And if you want to thank Bernie, why isn't he applying the same pressure that he was giving Trump to Joe Biden? And then you said, I understand that. I guess what I'm referring to is the political climate shifting. Under fascist Trump, people wanted to care about the working class. Now under Uncle Joe, they want to take away benefits and claim fiscal responsibility. You want to elaborate on that a little bit, RJ?
Yeah, I can actually elaborate on that. So what I meant by that under really Donald Trump is that, and to get to the Bernie point, yes, Bernie Grant gave a grandstanding speech on one of the COVID bills. But the problem is that Michael Bennet, a Democratic senator, he already written the bill. See, Bernie was using it as cover to make himself look good. So that's the part that people leave out. So yes, he did fight for it, which is good, but they already made that deal. And the argument I was making under saying that fascist Trump was pushing that is because Trump was getting hit left and right. See, Trump, he only does stuff that makes his ego look good. Like the Democrats do it all the time. Like they use Russiagate to get him to expand the military or whatever, and Democrats fall right in line for it. That's what the intelligence community does to him. And so what Donald Trump in general is what he did is, okay, let me just give these people money as well because it was an election year. So he wanted to get elected. The problem is he was a complete dumbass, still is a dumbass about COVID, and is totally ignorant politically, right? So that's the argument I'm making. But the problem is that even if you do say, okay, Joe Biden, conservative Democrat, he's not going to give you what you want. I mean, Donald Trump was willingly going to give people stuff before the election, before you vote for him. While Joe Biden is, wait until after you vote for me. And now, after you vote for him, he's like, I'm not going to fucking do it. So it's like, what is wrong with people? Like, you have to pressure a politician to do something before you fucking vote for him. Because if you wait, just wait, you're going to get fucked every single time. What happened to Biden care? I thought Uncle Joe was making Biden care, give everybody health care, especially those over the age of 65. Nope, not going to happen. So we have to do better.
Thought we were gonna push them left, guys. What's going on here? Like, I thought the squad and everybody, like, nothing. We're not getting anything out of this. Nobody's fighting for this in Congress. Independent media out there was celebrating. We shouldn't have been celebrating. That makes it seem like things were gonna get better, and they're not. Things are just continuing on like how they were. It's like if it were Trump's second term. The same people are really in charge. The predator class that pays all our politicians. Fuzz and Mac, you guys want to add on to any of that?
You pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, Mac, what's up?
You're good. We can move on.
All right.
All's good.
And then I saw this because people are getting paid slave wages right now. Like the minimum wage has not gone up in decades. It's absolutely disgusting. And I really admired what these people in Chipotle, I don't remember which city or state it was, but I think that every worker out there that works for a big chain like Chipotle, like Walmart, like Target, like Amazon should be doing something like this. So this is a great Twitter account you guys should follow. It's called @BrandsOwned. It posts stuff about when brands get owned. And here Chipotle is getting owned. It says the workers at this Chipotle said no more exploiting us. And here's the sign that they put up. They didn't show up to work. Instead, they left this sign and they said, "Attention Chipotle customers, want to know why we are closed? Ask our corporate offices why their employees are forced to work in borderline sweatshop conditions for 8+ hours without breaks. We are overworked, understaffed, underpaid, and underappreciated. Almost the entire management and crew have walked out until further notice. People should be greater than profits. People should be worth more than profits. Repost this if you agree. Help us spread awareness. Hashtag free. What does it say? Hashtag free chip workers." And then here's another one. Putting up signs said, "We demand change, overwork, underpaid. Sorry for the inconvenience, but due to us being overworked, understaffed, and underappreciated, we are protesting until conditions are changed." Again, I wish all workers that work for major chains do this. I love seeing that. But yeah, Mark, RJ, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this is a beautiful fucking thing because, even though I'm young, I still remember 2008.
Mm-hmm.
I was pissed. It was crazy. My dad's pay got froze. He worked at Toys R Us. Fuck that place. My mom was a nurse. It was hard on her. So, I mean, let's break this down. So what was the mentality back in the 2008 recession? Oh, look, look at all the jobs. You want to be with them? You want to be like the homeless? Oh, here, take the less pay. We'll give you your benefits. But the problem is inflation rose like a bitch. All the prices went up. Food, gas, it was fucking terrible. I mean, $4 a gallon for gas. I mean, that's how bad it was, right? Oh, but you still had a job. And so this time around, especially with COVID, all the billionaires, the oligarchs, making double their net worth in a year when it took them 20+ years to make that much money. Working class people were like, fuck that shit. We've seen what the COVID bills were, giving all that money to these different type of corporations. I mean, fucking casinos, they avoid our tax system year in and year out. And then when they get broke because of COVID comes around, oh, now they want the money, and they pay no taxes. So the average working American is fucking pissed. They're like, you know what? We're not having your shit. And I see on Twitter all the time some whole lot of apolitical people who aren't lefties are saying, hey, look, keep holding out. It's the same thing as Wall Street bet. Hold the line. Wait until you get 15. We'll get 15 one way or the other. We're not waiting for the federal government. We'll make the small and pops get 15. And right now I see across the country, I see businesses. It's like a bidding auction right now. 12.75, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. It's beautiful right now. So we have to keep fighting, and let's stop settling for less, because the billionaire oligarchs, they don't just, oh, well, it's capitalism, it's the free market, it's a downturn. Nope, they come crying and they shove everybody else out of the front of the line to take our money. So we need to hold fast, hold our feet, hold the politicians' feet to the fire, and take our money and run, because that's what the oligarchs are doing. And we need to do the exact same thing to save our brothers and sisters. And we also need mutual aid, just so we if there's a general strike that happens, that way our brothers and sisters can be safe. And that's what we got to do. And that's what I take from that segment.
Beautiful, man. Yeah, beautiful. I wish that everybody, like, they can't fire all of us if we all do it. Like if all these main chain workers started doing what these workers here who we're admiring here did this. But yeah, because it's just this one group, though, it's not enough. We should all be doing this. We should all be hitting the streets. Fuzz and Mac, do you guys agree? Do you think that this is not enough yet?
Yeah, I think it's an isolated incident, and I think it's great to think about a general strike and look into the history of that, how it's been done, what were the outcomes. There's a lot that we can learn from the history of the workers' movement. But at this time, we don't really have any culture around strikes at all. Like, it's very rare to see big strikes, at least in my experience here in New York City. Like, sometimes you'll see labor disputes that are kind of isolated here and there. I mean, there was a Hunts Point strike in the Bronx that I covered. I interviewed some workers over there. That's a whole nother story, but it's relatively rare. So I guess we need to figure out how do we make this a more common thing so that we can actually experience, like gain experience in this struggle and learn more, you know, because most people are relatively depoliticized. And even those of us that are like really into politics, very few of us have any like real connection to the labor movement, you know? I mean, even unionized labor is quite a rare thing nowadays. You know, it's pretty uncommon. It's only a small percentage of the population in the US that is part of a union. And that's a big issue. A lot of these low wage jobs, they're struggling to even get a union, you know? I was thinking like it would be an interesting idea to find a way for outsiders to kind of start making connections with people who do work these jobs and try to find like a few sympathizers within the jobs, you know, because when you actually work a job, it's actually really hard to like bring up politics with people, and like it's inherently risky when you could get fired, you know? Whereas if you don't work at that specific place, you can help other people organize and try to bring like create a network outside of work, you know, where people can safely talk and think and consider these political questions. It's really hard to like organize people on the job. It's at least way more risky, in my opinion.
Yeah, people are scared because in this capitalist system, they've been brainwashed to be afraid of it. Like we see, like in mainstream shows. I remember I was watching The Office a long time ago, and they were making a joke out of forming a union. When the people downstairs were trying to form a union, and they're like, "Oh, you guys are dumb. Like that's not how you do it." And you're gonna some. They were making fun of them pretty much for trying to organize. People are afraid to lose their health care. They're afraid to lose their benefits. A lot of them are working two jobs just to make ends meet and put food on the table for their family. People are afraid. But Fuzz, what do you think, man? How can we make people feel like they're not afraid?
I do gotta say that labor strikes are at the heart of most revolutions that happen. Like most of the industry of the country that's affected has to come to a screeching halt before any change happens. And several occasions, like um, Mac, I remember you interviewed some protesters that AOC had stopped by to provide a speech for, and
The
then
Hunt
oh,
strike protest.
yeah, that one. And ultimately, after one appearance, the company said, "All right, fine, we'll give you wage increases, but it'll accumulate over a period of a few years." And then the movement died. It looked like it fizzled out as a result of that because there wasn't any more steps that could be done. So something that should be thought about is having an established safety net to cover a community of people that want to like exit out of their job but won't have will have their most basic needs met in the middle of the collective bargaining process. That's that's something that I've been trying to think about on how to approach this kind of issue. I don't know what you guys think.
That's a really good idea. I mean, that's known as strike funds, if I understand correctly. It's basically just like having resources set aside so that you can help people who end up getting fired or whatever, like people who are not getting paychecks, so that a strike can actually last longer. We should learn about how to accumulate those kind of resources and, you know, learn how it's been done in the past. In terms of mass strikes being at the heart of any revolution, I'm not sure, because I think mass strikes are more involved in the history of insurrections. Like when governments are overthrown through insurrections, I think mass strikes play more of a role, whereas, we've talked about Mao's theory of protracted people's war and, building up a popular war over a long period of time. And in those situations, I'm not sure if, what role strikes and mass strikes have really played. We should look more into it. Also, when we talk about the Black Panther Party, one thing that is very much missing from Black Panther history is often involvement in the labor movement. That's something I haven't really come across too much, that topic. How did they actually involve themselves with labor? And one big problem with this, just to end this comment, I know I'm talking a lot. One of the reasons that the Panthers weren't that involved with the labor movement is that many Black people were excluded from labor altogether, or legal labor, right? Which is why the Panthers initially targeted who they called the brothers on the block, the long-term unemployed, people who struggled to maintain legal jobs, So that kind of took certain tactics off the table, I would say, or made them less possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Before we move on, I want to let people know about Derek Bros is working on a documentary series called The Pyramid of Power. And I urge people to share this to as many people as you can, because it exposes how the U.S. empire, the U.S. capitalist empire, extends its tentacles to almost everything that's around you in your life. With education, we have big education. Then we have our social media, big tech influencing things, Hollywood and our media. I just talked about The Office and how they were trying to implant messages about trying to make people feel afraid or feel like they're stupid for trying to form a union. Big pharma, all these things are connected. They're owned by very just a few individuals, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Bill Gates, and they implant messages in people that stays embedded in our subconscious to make us fear power and make it just be obedient servants. So the more that we share this, the more that we expose this, the more that you plant seeds into people and understand, oh my God, I've been brainwashed since I was a child, when I was in school, when they were teaching me to just color within the lines and not question authority. Exposing these things and helping people to understand how societies function and creating self-awareness, that can help us have a more conscious revolution to what's happening here. And it can help us think about solutions, about how we can opt out of the system, how we can have a revolution. I'm just gonna give some shout outs here before we move on here in the Super Ray chats. I've been demonetized. Just a reminder for everybody. Big Tech has caught me, as well as many others like Graham Elwood, Jamal Thomas, Nico House, and Combo Couch from the MCSC network, which I'm also a part of. So Shadowban Refugee said, got yourself a premium subscription today, fam. Thank you very much, Shadowban Refugee. Yeah, if you want to contribute, if you want me to read some of you guys' comments on the screen here and share our thoughts about what you guys say, just hit us up over at Rockfin. We'll read your comments. So let's
can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not the most important thing, but I just want to correct the record as a longtime Office fan. I think the main point of the episode was kind of showing, it was kind of educational, because it showed that once the higher ups realized that they were trying to form a union in the warehouse, the lady says, if they form a union, we'll end up closing down the whole branch or whatever. And that's a big issue with labor organizing too. From what I've seen at some of these Walmarts or these different corporate locations that actually do manage to get unionized, sometimes they just shut down the whole operation to punish everybody, because I guess a huge corporation can afford to take a short-term loss if they can make a huge statement and basically mess up all these people's lives,
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, in the beginning they were trying to make them look dumb, but yeah, it looks like they had to acknowledge that. But yeah, a good message to take away from that. RJ, you want to share any final thoughts before we move on to the Colombia topic?
Yeah, my final thoughts are just to add on to what my man said about that. It really speaks what happened to the Amazon union drive in Bessemer, Alabama. I mean, Amazon did a lot of dirty tactics, a lot of fear mongering through the mail about what the dangers are of having a union, often times threatening to close down a warehouse. And you see a lot of workers who may not understand all the details. I mean, it's hard. I mean, they're working 12 hours a day, blood,
Yeah.
sweat, and tears. I mean, so you can't really blame them. So I think like it's our job as political educators to really work hard to educate them about these certain scenarios. But it's crazy how capitalism, these big businesses band together and are so blatant in their ways to shut it down. So I think the problem the left has is yes, we can educate people to understand, but if these big corporations are basically making their material conditions more terrible than it is and threatening to do so if they join us, I mean, it makes it very difficult. So that's why if we are advocating for people to like go on a general strike, or if we want to run like mutual aid just in case something like that breaks down. So I think we really need to be more offensive in general, but better our defenses as well, because these big corporations, they can be offensive because they know they have friends in the industry where if they get unlucky, they can cover them. So that's
Mm-hmm.
just my final thought.
Well said. Yeah.
Can I say one last thing, just
Yeah.
real quick? It's really interesting how a lot of these jobs will actually have you watch anti-union videos, like
Oh,
when you get
I
hired.
was gonna
I know
ask
I
you that. Yeah.
experienced that.
Thanks
That's a
for
pretty,
bringing that
like,
up. Yeah.
that
So
shouldn't even be legal, honestly.
you
Like,
so
that's pretty manipulative.
so Mac, you had a job, right? Well, you had a job where they were making you watch anti-union videos. Can you
Yeah, I
imagine
only
like how
had to
many
watch
other jobs
one.
do that to their workers?
I only had to watch one anti-union video the day I got hired. But from what I was seeing about the Amazon situation in Alabama, if I understand correctly, they were being shown like anti-union information and propaganda pretty regularly. Like, I don't know how often, like maybe every few weeks or something like that, but they were definitely fear mongering and going out of their way to make people suspicious of unions too. I remember at the job that I had, they were saying like, watch out if anybody comes up to you trying to talk about unionizing, like they're trying to take advantage of you type of thing. So that's why I was thinking about like, how could we as outsiders on these jobs, they can't fire us. Like you could have potential to have like help create a network in somebody else's workplace,
Oh, okay.
maybe even easier than on your own job, because
Yeah.
where you could get fired. That's at least what I'm thinking so far.
We could try doing like what you told us the other day, like off of camera when we weren't like live or anything. You told us that what we could do is talk to some of these workers. Like if you see an Amazon delivery person, just be, hey man, what do you think about your job? Like I heard like such and such things, like people peeing in bottles. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see
Um,
Amazon workers all around New York City, and I started doing this thing. I've only talked to a few of them so far, but I want to do way more. I started doing this thing where I just come up and innocently ask them, be like, yo, bro, I know you're working, but can I ask you something real quick? And I'll be like, yo, I saw some documentaries about how like working for Amazon is really hard. Like, is that true?
yeah,
Like instead of just going up to them and telling them like, yo, Amazon's really evil or something like that,
yeah, it's too
they
pushy.
won't even know what to think. I try to just be like, what are they gonna say? And then depending on how they answer, you could continue the conversation. And the few guys that I did talk to so far, I told them look up Christian Smalls and the Amazon organizing, stuff like that. I mean, we can even have
Awesome.
like little
Yeah.
flyers that we could give them, a card or something where we can actually start developing a network, like start maintaining contact with them. Like, yo, how many people around this country get Amazon workers coming to their door delivering stuff, right?
Yeah.
You could start a quick conversation with them. And the fact that they're delivery drivers too, they don't even have their bosses like right on top of them too. So you could have like a real talk with them.
And I think that even if they don't say things are that bad, in the back of their head or in their head, they are thinking things are probably really bad. They just don't want to talk about it probably to a stranger, but at least you're planting that seed into them and, giving them information about Chris Smalls and all that. That implants some seeds for them to create some kind of organization there where they can fight back. But yeah, well said, all of you guys. So let's talk about what's happening in Colombia now. So what's happening there, and what the U.S. leftists can learn from this. So pretty much Ivan Duque, who's the neoliberal right-wing president of Colombia, and what is um, happening in the country right now is directly connected to him. The government of Colombia and its militarized police are attacking its people. Their internet services are being turned off so that people in other countries don't find out exactly what is happening on the ground. Before the internet was turned off, people were recording, uploading, and streaming what was happening. All the police abuses were being recorded and shared on the internet and social media. This is similar to what happened in January 6th when the government shut down the internet right outside the Capitol to prevent certain streamers from showing what was happening. Combo Couch, our colleagues over here at the MCSC network, were streaming what was happening on the ground, and then they had to stop because the internet was shut down. So pretty much what sparked these protests is that the government wanted to tax its middle class 20% via a tax bill. Meanwhile, the taxation was decreasing for the elite class. The neoliberal Colombian government wanted to raise $6 billion from its people this way. And if people are responding by protesting in the streets in this way and throwing rocks and whatever they can at the militarized police that's also abusing them, it must be because the government hasn't been repaying taxpayers with their basic needs. So I'm just going to read this real quick here for everybody. So it says here, according to statistics published by DANE, which is National Administration Department of Statistics, this Thursday, the monetary poverty index in Colombia for 2020 increased 6.8% and stood at 42.5%. In other words, DANE is reporting that 21.2 million Colombians do not have enough income to meet their basic needs. This is from the Colombian reports, and they're citing DANE. So yeah, there are reports of the militarized police killing innocent people, killing protesters, raping women, and detaining protesters. So I'm gonna play some video footage of what's going on there. Then I'm gonna get some thoughts from my panel here. Just waiting for Twitter to finish loading up here. So this is from José Miguel Vivanco. It says Colombia con testigos presenciales y verificaciones digital de videos hemos corroborado el uso de tanquetas con lanzadores de proyectiles múltiples dirigidos y manifestantes. So he's talking about tanks and other weapons that are being thrown at the citizens here. Let me unplug this so that people can hear, so that my panel can hear the video footage. By the way, can you guys see that? Like, are you guys watching the stream?
Ay, el abuelo. ¡Venga! ¡Venga, China!
So here's another video by Dan Cohen. So supposedly they're reporting, Colombia's reporting that there's like about 36 people that have died. And then he tweets this out, says official sources say 43 people have been killed, protesting in Colombia, but journalist Sofia Baudo tells me the Colombian government has secretly ordered the morgues and hospitals to cover up the actual number. SOS Colombia.
At the time of this recording, 34 people have been reported killed, but that's almost certainly below the actual number. According to Colombian journalist Laura Sofia Mejia, the government is covering the real number up.
Hay una cosa importante que al tener un contacto con una de las instituciones averiguando el ingreso de muertos en una de las noches, nos dicen que internamente la decisión es que no le van a dar información a la prensa.
At the time of this recording, 34 people have been reported.
Some more from Dan Cohen said, today in Cali, paramilitaries protected by police opened fire on unarmed protesters from a ground known as the Indigenous Guard. Several injuries, no reported deaths. Here's one of the numerous videos of the attack.
Policía está bien. La policía está disparando, la policía está disparando. La policía está disparando. Alerta, 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 la policía está disparando. La policía dispara, dispara la minga, la policía. La policía dispara a la minga, la policía está bien.
Here's another one. Says the video indisputably shows
¿Qué está pasando ahí?
facilitating the escape of paramilitary assassins after attacking unarmed
Por eso marica eran uniformados. O será gente. De pronto un sí, yo creo que un policía de civil.
¡Ay, qué puta!
¿Sí ven? Es que los policías también son unos malparidos. Ellos tienen gente infiltrada. Donde los ven. Poder de la mano esposado.
There's a bunch of videos like this, guys. Like here's somebody who got shot by the police. This is graphic footage. This is warning for people here. There's blood coming out of this person. And then here's a final one I'm going to show for you guys. This is showing like the militarized police. Look at how many there are.
Tanquetas y todo, mira. Mira la cantidad de policías que hay. SMAT. Estos eran los que estaban ayer en Gachanzipá, mira. Mira todo el SMAT, mira los escudos. Mira las grúas que ellos traen para correr los camiones, amor. Mira. Estos eran los que estaban ayer en Tocancipá. Mira toda esa mano de camiones que traen. Hartísimo. Claro, ahí está la SIJIN, la policía, SMAT.
Backed by the U.S. But the only, and then look, it's showing tanks. The only time I've seen almost this many police officers is in D.C. during the Black Lives Matter protests. But yeah, guys, it seems a lot of this stuff is really similar to how the U.S. is. Like neoliberal states share similar characteristics: a militarized police force, people being exploited, their taxes getting increased. Meanwhile, the elite class gets their taxes reduced. And I just want to reiterate this for people: there are hundreds of people that are missing. RJ, what do you think, man? You see the similarities here with the with what's going on in Colombia and things here in the U.S.?
Similarities. I mean, I think you mentioned that the middle class would have like a 20% tax increases. Was that correct?
Yeah.
So I think that's really what is terrible is that taxes increased by really the top people, the 1%, the oligarchs, they get theirs decreased. And it's kind of the similar thing that happened in the 70s to the 80s. And, Bill Clinton kind of sealed the deal with his version of welfare reform, which really killed working class people. It was terrible. And so you're going to get violence like that, especially when, working class people are getting kicked in the ass all the time. I mean, George Carlin was right about that. I mean, I think he, in one of his comedy specials, he said, working class people do all the work, middle class people do all the work, and then of course the rich oligarchs, they make out with all the money. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, even comics like him have always have nuggets of truth in it, and I think his comedy reminds us that, hey, he makes fun of us a couple of times, but it really shows us that we're more powerful than what we think. And really, back to the situation with the police force in Colombia, of course, it's 100% resemblance to the United States. I mean, instead of using real bullets, they would hit us with rubber bullets, even though it's just as painful,
Yeah.
cause just as much injury. I mean, one reporter who was an independent journalist and photojournalist got shot in the eye and lost an eyeball because of a cop. So this type of behavior is absolutely terrible, and especially what's going on in Colombia. So I think this whole situation um, is terrible, but I'm not really sure what we can do to actually stop it, because as long as the military budgets continue to increase and also the police budgets continue to increase, it's going to be hard to stop them. And I think that's why really the American government and as well as other governments internationally are figuring out that, hey, if we just beef up the cops, make sure they have that type of stuff, if something gets ugly, we can suppress them, we can keep them down. And I think the issue really with us working class people, we have to realize that we're not going to get victories all the time, but just by us upsetting their apple cart, by pissing them off, by continuing to protest and to agitate, whether you're in the streets or if you're in the workforce, by you refusing to accept anything less than your worth, you're actually helping the next person down the line and behind you. And you're really getting rid of that mindset of, oh, stay down and keep your head down. So I think that's what we have to do to get better.
Yeah, it's funny because in some instances here in the United States, people get taxed 22%. And this is the reaction of the people there in Colombia when it's 20%. I'm curious what your stance is, RJ. Are you for like defunding are you for abolishing the police or defunding them? Like what is your stance on that?
Oh, I'm for getting rid of fuck all cops. Get rid of all of them, abolish the police. And of course, in America, I mean, the police were created because of this, because of slave captures.
Yeah.
Those were the first cops. If a black slave was left the plantation, went up north, they created those cops in the first place because we were capital, we weren't people. So if you escaped, we hurt the white slave owner. He was pissed, so he called the cops. That's why the big business and cops are friends. That's why it started. Ever notice how when a cop goes in a poor person's community, they rough them up, throw them in the cop car, send them to jail. But if it's in a rich community, oh, you just send the cop a couple of donuts and some coffee, and oh, well, nice meeting you, Frank. So it's just such bullshit how this entire cop system is, and we have to get fucking rid of it. I mean, look at New York. 50% of their budget it goes to the cops.
Yeah.
Okay, look at California. I mean, I think it's almost 60%. So we got to stop giving these cops this money to keep killing us like that. So that's my opinion on that. We have to abolish the police. I mean, defund is defund compared to abolish. It's kind of like Medicare for all versus really having a
like a public
nationalized
option
healthcare system.
or like
Exactly.
middle of the road thing.
Exactly. So we have to always find the more progressive and really more leftist alternative. We have to keep updating our own demands, because that's how we can keep moving the window of acceptability further and further to the left.
I'm with you, man. Yeah, I'm for abolishing the police too. We should have our own system where communities organize themselves and they keep things vigilant. They keep the vigilance within their neighborhoods, and then they get to meet people. They get to meet their neighborhood more when they organize in this way, and so they know like who's being suspicious, who's not. Like everybody's talking. Not only that, but there's specific situations for different things. Like you can have social workers for certain things. If someone's acting out like really crazy and violently, like I mean, communities can train for that. Fuzz and Mac, what are your thoughts?
I definitely think we got to abolish the U.S. police state, but I think we should be specific that abolishing the current existing power structure is not necessarily the same, at least not in my eyes, as having no laws or no law enforcement whatsoever. I think there needs to be a form of law enforcement that could actually protect people the way it's intended to, at least in theory, basically serve the needs of the working class. I I do think there needs to be some kind of rules in society. You know, I think most people believe that, but I
Yeah.
just don't think policing should even be like a profession, to be honest. Yo, these dudes need to get real jobs because right now, like, they don't do anything productive. All they do is terrorize people, and it gives them a kind of cult mentality where most cops are probably just friends with other cops, and like, there's a big subculture around that shit that is very cultish, and they basically see themselves as being above the common people, you know, and that doesn't allow them to like actually be a popular force that could do good, in my eyes.
I do want to add to your point because you make a relevant point, so I do want to entertain it. But this is the exact reason why I'm for abolishing the police, and I think what you're representing is that, hey, let's have some rules and strategies put in place, because if we do take that option, it creates a power vacuum. I mean, look what happened during the French Revolution. They got rid of the monarchy. Yes, that was fine, but they had bloody wars for the next 100 or to 200 years. So I think if we are going to take the abolish police route, we have to make sure that we have strategies or policies put in place and making new laws. So when we get to that step, we're not going to be guessing and having a deer in headlights moment about how we're going to govern ourselves as a state. Because yes, we do need to have certain rules and laws to abide by so that everyone can have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness like the Constitution should be, even though a lot of times we know it's not. So I do believe that what my man said is valid if we're going to take that step.
Yeah, I think cops should be elected. Sorry, Fuzz. I don't know if you want to talk. If you want to talk, just jump in and interrupt me. Otherwise, I want to talk about like maybe proposing democratic procedures around like community policing. I don't even like the word policing. Honestly, it's so tainted. Like community safety groups, whatever we want to call them. Go ahead, Fuzz, if you want to cut me off.
Police chiefs are democratically elected, though. I'm not sure all cops are.
I mean, I feel like every cop should either be elected by local people who know them, or there should at least
by the neighborhood, by the community.
There should at least be some kind of vouching process, you know, because I was seeing this case where this guy who was becoming a cop, there is actually a vouching process nowadays. Apparently, they interviewed his family members. His sister told them, she was like, "Yo, please do not let this guy become a cop." Like, she just knew her brother was crazy, some white lady. She was like, "Yo, don't let him become a cop." And then after they ignored her, they hired him, and he ended up killing somebody on the job.
So yeah, I pretty much agree with most of what you said already. It was to essentially for communities to start electing their own people and representatives to protect their own neighborhoods and whatnot, along with determining their own laws for their own area that they determine would keep the area safe, and then people would just be hired to reinforce that. And yeah, that essentially means that as long as there is a solid game plan in place, I am for abolishing the police. And I've come across FBI documents where they were complicitly turning a blind eye to the KKK and the local police departments in ignoring a massacre called the Greensboro massacre, where five members of a communist party were protesting the KKK, and they were assassinated. And an intelligence bulletin board about 5 days later after it happened, it says there's no reason to investigate the KKK at this time. So that's an institution that's long been infiltrated and needs to be done away with, in my eyes. And the similarities between the U.S. police and the Colombian police are in how they train their police forces with each other. And apparently, and this is from a Black Power media live stream that was on the 10th that was discussing Colombia. And they had mentioned that the police system in Colombia was so advanced and so bloatedly organized where it could be exported to other countries to assist in other police regimes in oppressing their own people. So that's one connection. It's similar to how the United States and Israel train their police forces with each other. And we're seeing it, how that's being played out in Palestine.
Yeah, Fuzz, that's a great point. If I remember correctly, wasn't on the Black Power Media, the lady who's being interviewed on the Black Power Media live stream, she was saying that Colombian police have been sent to Haiti, if I remember correctly. They've been sent to Haiti to help the cops do like suppress protests there. You know, Haiti has a huge protest movement for quite a while now, months, if not longer.
Yeah, they did mention Haiti, that now that Colombia is coming into the spotlight, the host of the show now questions like, hey, what happened to Haiti and why isn't that getting as much attention now? So that's another point too. It's good that you brought that up.
So what do you guys think about the Colombians' response to this, like the 20% tax increase among the on the middle class, and the way that in multiple cities across Colombia, people took to the streets, fighting against the police. And they have a really hard uphill battle because the Colombian government is a puppet of the U.S. government. They don't have as much control to really change things unless we act and we also take action to stop the US from funding all these neoliberal governments that are in the global south, also some of their Western allies as well, and exploiting these people and pretty much treating them like slaves, like this, like progressively via incremental steps, taking away more and more of their financial freedom. I guess I can start with you, RJ. What do you think? What can we as U.S. citizens learn from this, from what the Colombians are doing?
I guess what we can learn from is that we have to be just as willing as them to really hit the streets. And I think we can even learn from what happened in Bolivia. Like a lot of people there, not only do they hit the streets, but they are very politically educated about their economy, about their situation, and they were heavily unionized. You know, so those are the things we could really learn from both. I would say my thing about the Colombia situation compared to the United States is, you know, I really don't know, honestly. I don't really know what we could do. You know, I mean, just look what happened really the last year with the Black Lives Matter protests this summer after what happened to George Floyd. Look what happened to really a lot of people being upset due to the COVID relief bills, where the 1% took all the money, while the little man only got like a $1,200 one-time payment for 7 months. So I don't really know. But one thing I do know is that you look at what happened in American history, what some of the successes were, and I think you have to kind of strive for that. But as time has changed, so do your strategies have to change. You know, I think we talked earlier about how even what happened in the 60s, peaceful protests were deemed as radical and crazy and un-American. And nowadays, all the politicians, they love it because it's basically a parade for them. They can control where they go. I mean, there was one protest where the entire city shut down a highway on purpose. And it's like, usually those type of protests are supposed to disrupt. But if you know ahead of time, you can tell all the trucking industries, hey, these are where the people are going to be, take an alternative route or go earlier in the day or later, depending on when the protest is. And it defeats the entire purpose. So we as a unit, especially workers and people in the United States, we have to learn from other countries on what strategies work. And we also have to learn from our own history. So that's why I really quote Bolivia, what they've done. I mean, that was one of the biggest leftist victories I've probably seen in almost a decade. So it's really beautiful what they've done there. So we have to learn from the successes there. We also have to learn from the activism and the willingness to really be aggressive and hit the streets from those in Colombia, in order for us in the United States to really see some successes and really to bring about an international type of change.
Well said. Yeah. I think it all starts with informing people too about what an actual protest is, because now a lot of them are corporately sponsored. Again, like you mentioned, like they clear out the streets for some of these protesters to the point where it's not really creating an inconvenience for people. If you're not creating an inconvenience, especially to the powers that are oppressing us, then it's not a protest anymore. We got to teach people about how a lot of these movements are co-opted. like the Sunrise Movement, getting paid by billionaires and all these other companies that we're supposed to be fighting against, that are creating the climate change and creating this environmental destruction. Yeah, Max, sorry to cut you off. You can go ahead and add on what you were gonna say.
Well, I just wanted to say that I want to put the current Colombian protests into a bit of historical context without going into too much detail. Colombia had the longest running leftist insurgencies on the entire Western Hemisphere. Basically, since the early 50s until just a few years ago, when there was a supposed peace deal that was signed, that entire time, there were active guerrilla movements in the jungles of Colombia. And recently, with the so-called peace deal that was signed, we have actually seen the government take advantage of the willingness for peace, or the willingness to, come to a negotiation. And they basically betrayed a lot of the demobilized guerrillas, and a lot of them have been getting assassinated. Also in Colombia, it's not only guerrillas or revolutionaries or far leftists that are assassinated. Many trade union leaders and just like relatively mild reform activists are frequently assassinated. So to me, I'm really wondering what's going to come out of this current protest movement. If it's going to lead more people to maybe revive guerrilla movements, I really don't know, because initially, after World War II, there was a period called La Violencia, literally the violence, where a populist leader was assassinated, and then, like, from my understanding, like, the government just started destroying leftist organizations, just killing people. And so the only way to survive, people were basically forced to become guerrillas. They were forced to go take refuge in the jungles. Y'all should look it up. Google Colombia, La Violencia, and you'll find all about it. Like, I feel that people have been given no choice in a way but to pick up the gun, especially in Latin America.
I let my family in Peru know, because of the history there as well. Like, when they try to understand why some people pick up the gun, I'm not saying like some of the actions that some of these people take, like especially when it comes to killing innocent people, that all people should do that, but try to understand why it happens. It happens because these people feel like there's no way out. They don't have the same opportunities as some people in the main capital, or the big cities in these South American countries have. A lot of these rural areas, like, they feel like they have no way out. They don't have the same opportunities that other people have with educating themselves to get themselves out of their conditions. It's really difficult, and things keep getting worse and worse as the decades go on, and these corporations get more and more powerful, and the U.S. empire becomes more and more powerful. Fuzz, you want to add anything on before we move on?
Yeah, to RJ, I noticed that you had been making a comparison of how the protests have been like very co-opted and very performative recently. This, to me, that sounds very similar to how, like, a position that I agree with Malcolm X, and how he viewed the civil rights movement, and how it had seemed like another controlled event to be able to gain concessions from an oppressor instead of hardcore, more substantive gains. And I was just wondering, like, if you had viewed the event the same way, like similar to that.
In ways, yeah. I mean, even MLK said it himself in 1968, my dream turned into a nightmare. Because, yes, a lot of the things he advocated for, I mean, we all know it wasn't just, I have a dream. As well, he was very anti-capitalist. He also wanted to unionize people as well. So a lot of those different policies he advocated for. But I do sympathize with what you said about Malcolm X in general, because it's the difference between what we have in the left that still exists today is reformism versus really anarchism. And that's something I even covered on my show. Me personally, in my opinion on this, is that I'm more on the really anarchism and revolutionary side first, then reform, because my view on this is you have to dismantle the existing machine in order to create your own establishment. That's why I disagree with the squad, because why are you trying to reform a system which won't give you power in the first place? And so I feel like, too, yes, a lot of the reforms that were put in place, don't get me wrong, that ended because of the civil rights movement was great. But we saw even over the time, I mean, even what FDR did in the 1930s and 40s was reform. He reformed capitalism. But we've seen over time through now, a lot of the reforms put in place back then are either a shell of its former self. I mean, look at the Civil Rights Act of 64 and 65. Just recently, it wasn't repealed. Just recently, they nuclearized. I mean, they even tried doing that through like Georgia with their civil rights bills as well. And so that's the problem we have with reformism. It's great, don't get me wrong, but we have to constantly fight at the apple because the system is always wants to revert itself back to what it was before. So we always have to constantly fight and hit the streets for it. But if we continue to go on the revolutionary or anarchism route by getting rid of the existing machine, then we ourselves can really create something out of the new. So that's why I do love having these conversations with those who are more anarchists, those who are more really, I would say, reformists, because it is a good debate, because both could work in tandem if it goes about the right way. So that's just my opinion.
RJ, real quick, I don't know, Franco, is it okay if I ask him about a little bit what he just said?
Yeah, real quick, and then we'll dive into this article.
Okay, no, I'm just curious. Why were you more attracted to anarchism rather than like socialism or communism? Is there a reason?
Well, in general, I classify myself as an anarcho-syndicalist. Like, to me, I do believe in the ways that anarchism is great, but I am in favor of using labor as a means to upset capital. So that's kind of my opinion on that.
Okay, I'd love to talk about that more at some point. That would be really interesting.
Yeah,
I'd like to dig deeper, you know?
I think there's a lot of agreement here among us. Just want to read this Super Ray here from Bubblegum Douche said, President Credit Card has a long history, of course that's Biden, has a long history of being even more of a corrupt, pathological liar than Trump. They're both disgusting and perfectly demonstrate the total disconnect between the actual people and the so-called government of, by, and for the people. And when so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, it's even more difficult to protest/strike. Yes, less than living wage jobs. I was talking about that the other day with Charles and Tom Coffey about how Biden is more of a pathological liar when Trump is more of like, he exaggerates stories. He's like a sicer. Like he likes to like hype him up, like exaggerate his stories. Like he's like, oh, we're gonna build the wall like 10 feet high, and an article comes out like, fact check, we can't build it that high. I was like, we know he was just exaggerating. Two different kinds of liars. But yeah, speaking of Joe Biden, he has an involvement actually in what's going on in Colombia right now. It's because of him that the police in Colombia is this powerful, or at least a big contribution to what he did. So here's an article from Left Voice. It's called How Biden Funded Colombia's Deadly Police Regime. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the passages here in this article, and then I'll ask my panel for their thoughts. So it says here, the Duque regime, again, Ivan Duque is the president of Colombia, and the Manuel and Uribe regimes before it would not be what it is today if not for Plan Colombia, a policy that Joe Biden himself, while the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 2000, this is a position that he was in back in 2000. This plan is responsible for increased violence in the region and the displacement of over 7 million Colombians since its inception. It is directly responsible for the creation and training of violent Escuadrón Móvil Antidisturbios. It's hard for me to say this word in Spanish. Antidisturbios, so ESMAD police force. Biden's support for Plan Colombia 21 years ago was part of the international front of the U.S.'s war on drugs, which is responsible for both the militarization of much of Latin America and the racist mass incarceration of policing of millions of people of color in the United States. Plan Colombia provided $10 billion in military funding and the transfer of Black Hawk helicopters to Colombian security forces. The aid was used not only to fund military operations in Colombia's civil war, but also to provide huge bonuses to military officials under the guise of fighting drug trade. Colombian security forces used this aid to murder thousands of civilians, claiming that they were guerrilla soldiers killed in combat. In constructing the plan, Biden pushed for increased militarization time and time again, even going so far as to push back against efforts by some of his colleagues to redirect Colombian military funding to domestic drug treatment programs. Along with billions of dollars of funding, the CIA also trained battalions of the Colombian army to protect oil pipelines belonging to U.S. companies. Again, resources that is going to be used for capital is more important than human lives. Biden's policy towards Colombia came in the middle of a war between the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, and the Colombian government. Though the two sides agreed to an uneasy peace in 2016, the internationally recognized Colombian government will not be satisfied until it has surpassed all opposition, whether it comes from the FARC or protesters like those in the streets today. The Civil War was responsible for displacing millions of refugees and the deaths of thousands of civilians, many of which were indigenous communities. In crafting Plan Colombia, Biden made sure that he could influence the outcome of the conflict to better serve U.S. imperialist interests. As he said in the speech at the time, when I said, "Do we take sides?" the answer is yes, we take sides. And I just want to remind people, I reported this a long time ago, an article that talked about how when the U.S. police force was militarized during the Obama administration, a lot of those were Biden's pet projects. He served a key role in militarizing the police. And now we're seeing that he served a big role in militarizing the police in Colombia. Same thing in Israel. He's for the militarization of the police force and increasing the tech for the military forces in Israel against the Palestinians that are being occupied there. So it goes on to say, a report in March 2002 found that a result of the conflict, an average of 20 violent deaths had taken place each day in Colombia. In other words, violence in the region only increased the implement of Plan Colombia. The report also focuses on the harm that U.S.-backed forces caused to the indigenous communities. With U.S. funding and support, the Colombian military destroyed crops the Kofan indigenous people relied on for subsistence through intense aerial fumigation, constructed oil pipelines through Uwa land, and armed paramilitary groups which used the excuse of the Civil War to repeatedly massacre indigenous people uninvolved in the conflict. This is a pattern that we see over and over again in the global south. Indigenous people that have nothing to do with the conflict, they just live there, and these police forces or these capitalists that want to build, that want to destroy their land, build pipelines there, these indigenous people end up getting killed. Despite extensive documentation of the violence that Colombian security forces have inflicted on civilians throughout the past 2 decades, Biden bragged about his support for the imperialist project as recently as January 2020. While Biden has aggressively fought to fund the escalation of military force against the working and poor people of Colombia, he has been just as ardent a supporter of financial intervention in the region. In his decades in government, Biden has overseen the U.S.'s neoliberal offenses in Latin America, ensuring the creation of new markets for U.S. capital abroad, and working with financial institutions to make economies of these countries completely dependent on foreign aid and loans. Plan Colombia opened the way for the U.S. government and U.S. companies to work in tandem with the Colombian government to implement a wave of privatization and other neoliberal policies, increase poverty and unemployment to unprecedented levels in the country. In 2003, the the International Monetary Fund, intervened to negotiate a $2.1 billion loan with the Colombian government on the condition that it would implement a series of austerity measures, including the restructuring of the pension program, cuts to the public sector workforce, and the privatization of a major bank. So while the U.S.-backed politicians and military officials ensured their own profits and those of U.S. capitalists, workers and oppressed people across the country were forced to suffer the consequences. And if his rhetoric on the campaign trail is any indication, Joe Biden's plans for Colombia have not changed. He remains a staunch crusader for U.S. imperialism in Latin America, promising to work with the Duque regime to quell dissent by killing activists, funding death squads, promoting foreign investment, and opening up Colombia for further privatization of and attacks on the country's crumbling social infrastructure. RJ, what are your thoughts on Biden playing a key role in this militarization of Colombia's police force?
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, what people keep forgetting is that Uncle Joe was in the same administration as Obama. Mm-hmm. You know, Obama was famous for giving the United States police force billions of dollars to, you know, beat your kids who are trying to protest for black people getting killed by cops. Internationally, you know, Obama created 5 wars after the 2 he inherited from George W. Bush. So this type of behavior overseas, you know, I'm not surprised about. I mean, the United States imperialism in general, their whole idea is suppression. You know, they're not trying to help other countries or police the world, that type of bullshit that we've been selling since Theodore Roosevelt was president. So that's how long really it's been. And even with the true Monroe Doctrine that basically said any country or place around the world that's on our side of the hemisphere, we could police. So that's how far back the American imperialism goes, in which how we feel the world should be subservient to us. And so in general, we do have to trying to find ways to put checks on these politicians like Biden, because even under Trump, I mean, Republicans don't give a fuck. I mean, they know that we know who they are. So they're not trying to pretend. That's why Donald Trump, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, these assholes, they can do this blatantly. But, you know, even sometimes the Democratic base, they don't want to hear this type of stuff. So they have guys like Obama, you know, they send him out there, pretty faced black man, charming and handsome. He could do imperialism. And a lot of times people on the left say that Obama makes conservatism look nice. And having a guy like Uncle Joe wearing aviator sunglasses looking ice cream, he's the cool Joe, you know, of course they're probably doing something right. So Democrats in general play up this type of imperialism, make it look pretty, while, you know, Republicans, you know, they make fascism more apparent. And so what's going on with Colombia and with Joe Biden, this is the same shit he's trying to do in Venezuela. Even during his campaign, he was more hawkish on Venezuela than Donald Trump, the evil fascist dictator, you know, go figure. So I'm really worried because liberals don't give a fuck, you know.
Yeah.
Conservatives don't either, but they're blatant in their hatred for those overseas. Liberals, you know, now that the orange idiot is out of office, they're just happy with Uncle Joe and Auntie Kamala. So it's very hard to talk to these individuals as well. So I'm not really sure what the fuck we can do.
And I've said it on this show, like I could go after Marco Rubio because he said that he stands with the Duque government, and I'm saying it here on the show. Yeah, Marco Rubio said that, and he's saying that the protesters are destabilizing the democracy there, even though the U.S. played a big hand in getting the Duque regime elected. But again, water is wet. We know what the Republicans are. We know what they'll stand for. That's obvious. Why we're pushing for these stories about Biden is because it's not as obvious to people that are in the left, sadly. And there are many people in independent media, like TYT, like the Majority Report crowd, that were shaming people if they didn't vote for Joe Biden. And this is what we get. We get more deaths and destruction. He has played a role in the past of creating death and destruction, and this is what you voted for. More death and destruction happening in the global south. To our people, like everybody here in this panel discussion, if you haven't noticed, comes from the global south. Is a descendant from the global south. So Skeptical Mantis and Fuzz, what do you guys think?
About what aspect specifically?
About the
Biden.
militarization that Biden participated in for the Colombian police forces, how there were people that were in independent media that called themselves leftists that were shaming people into voting for this, and then what we get is more death and destruction.
Yeah, it's insane. Yo, Fuzz, did you want to speak? I think you were about to say something.
No, so let you to go ahead.
Oh, I think what RJ said was pretty good. I don't have that much to add. I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised. You know, Biden has been the architect of pretty much every damn terrible imperialistic policy in modern times. So, yeah, fuck Biden.
I mean, the same people who told us to vote for Joe Biden are the same ones, especially if we're talking about TYT, these are the same people who told us, you're irresponsible if you don't vote for Elizabeth Warren, the person who backstabbed Bernie in the primary. So it's just, these are very stupid, people, Jank's a cuck right now. And of course, now he's trying to, push the squad to do some shit after they have no leverage. So go figure. So stop watching TYT. I just hate the defenders of the squad. Like, they're politicians overall. So you can have the argument that, guys like Chuck Schumer, all these other Democrats, it's perfectly okay to call them out and push them. But when it's your precious squad progressives, we have to treat them nicer, even though they're just as well as politicians as anyone else. Mm-hmm. So that's what I disagree with.
I can't wait for the day where it becomes just as obvious that the Republicans are not our side. It becomes just as obvious that AOC and the squad and all these independent media personalities on the left that bootlick the system, when that becomes just as obvious as how the Republicans are not on our side. I can't wait for that day. But since it's not that obvious, that's why I feel like I have to talk about it. And because the police force is killing indigenous people there, like we were just saying earlier, these people feel like they have no choice but to respond and defend themselves. This is similar, in my opinion, this is similar to what the UN Resolution 3743, which talks about how a nation that is under occupation or under colonial conquer has a right to defend itself via armed struggles. So that's what the indigenous people and a lot of the other Colombian citizens feel like they have to do. I showed you guys the videos, and there's more videos out there of the police in Colombia killing innocent people out in the street, just walking on the sidewalk, people that just have nothing to do with it. But yeah, anyway, any final comments?
Add that in addition to indigenous people, it's also many African people in Colombia and involved in these protests, right? We learned from watching the Black Power media stream recently that they claim that Colombia has the third largest population of African people outside of the African continent. The first was Brazil, the second was the United States, and the third was Colombia. The thing is, from my understanding, they tend to live in certain areas that are a bit more remote or, I guess, isolated, like especially on the coastal areas. So I guess, people don't think of Black people when they think of Colombia, because that's not what is shown on TV.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of African people. I didn't know that Colombia was third, but it doesn't surprise me, considering like their soccer team. Like I remember had a lot of Black people in it. But yeah, I didn't know Brazil was ahead of the US. That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, those people are victims too. From the police violence. Any final words before we move on?
So I had actually wanted to mention that Plan Colombia sounds a little bit like the Drug Enforcement Agency, and how it had an earlier expansion to be able to find a reason to export police into Latin American countries, and imperialism abroad has to be applied to imperialism at home. Because the exact same thing happened, where the amount of police that were dedicated to finding non-existent drugs to make Black people look like a threat at home was a similar phenomenon that happened in the past, and the same thing is happening in Colombia with Plan Colombia. From how I'm understanding that plan being rolled out.
Yeah, basically Plan Colombia, from my understanding, was like using discussion of fighting the drug war and decreasing cocaine production, and using that kind of as a cover to focus on targeting the left-wing guerrillas, and specifically a group called the FARC, F-A-R-C, the FARC rebels. They were the main guerrilla group in Colombia.
So this next question is for you guys, Skeptical and Fuzz, since I'm in a study group with you guys, and then I'll throw it over for RJ. What aspects of Black Panther history do you think that we can emulate here in the U.S.? Either one of you guys can answer.
Fuzz, do you want to start, or do you want me to try?
So I guess I'll start with mentioning like the good that the Black Panther Party did in what I believe was making the capitalist social order look like shit with the community survival programs. Give me a moment. Because I want to list off a few things that they, as part of, that's usually only masked and covered by the free breakfast program, but they also had a newspaper service, a liberation schools that were later called intercommunal youth institutes, People's Free Medical Research Health Clinic, a free clothing program, free busing to prisons program, Seniors Against Fearful Environment program, Sickle Cell Anemia Research Foundation, and free housing competitive program. All of those programs are lost in like a whole bunch of leftist commentators calling Fred Hampton a community service breakfast hero. And that's something that I think should be fixed when people talk about the Black Panthers, to not simplify their history down to something so simple, but like as a starting point when we're trying to learn from them.
Yeah, I want to point out that all of these community service programs that provided valuable material aid to people who needed it are very important. And we need to know that these programs were most threatening to the system when it was put together with armed self-defense and preparation for revolution. A lot of people like to separate that aspect of the Black Panther Party from like the discussion of the community service programs, because, you know, even a lot of capitalists, a lot of churches, they do all kinds of charity, you know, but it was when the Black Panther Party used the community service programs to build people up for a fight and to educate them and to like raise their fighting spirits. That's when it really became a major threat.
Yeah, go ahead, RJ.
I want to add that the very first program that the very first program that the Panthers ever did was actually, well, specifically Huey Newton's little cell, which later became known as like the main leadership of the Black Panther Party. Huey's little group, the main thing they first did before they fed breakfast to children or did any other program, they picked up guns, law books, and they went and confronted the cops in public within the law as much as possible. And for a time, the cops didn't really know how to react, and they had kind of like, I would not say that they ended police brutality by any means. They were a tiny group initially, but locally they were getting a reputation for being able to make cops reluctant to act as flagrantly as they had in the past. You know, at these points, the cops were kind of like unsure what to do. And later, you know, there was a broader strategy to defeat the Panthers and respond. They outlawed the legal open carry, and that basically destroyed the patrols. But I mean, I don't mean to get too detailed into the history. I just want to say picking up the gun was the very first thing that Huey Newton and his people did when they formed the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, go ahead, RJ. What do you think we can emulate?
I just want to add to that point. What happened with that is that just to add to that, the Black Panthers Party is, a black person was pulled over by a cop. Like they said, they would open carry out their watch. If the police got froggy, well, they leaped. And the problem is a famous conservative asshole president named Ronald Reagan, who was the governor of California at the time. He's the one in the 70s who got rid of open carry. Oh, so now when black people want to defend themselves, now you want to change the laws. So apparently open carry and guns and stuff, that's not legal, that's not cool. But one of the things I do like about the Black Panther Party was actually the breakfast program. But honestly, we could expand it into more of a 21st century model of not just breakfast, any type of food, any time of day for food, and as well as growing your own food. Because even during the pandemic, what shocks me is that the food industrial complex, especially with industrial farming, there was a potato shortage, all because potatoes overnight, because all these restaurants being shut down, they had no one to sell. And if they did try to sell it, it would be pennies because the supply was in abundance. I mean, supply and demand. So when supply exceeds demand, the price of that commodity goes through the floor. So basically, all those potatoes are meaningless. And what they would do is they basically make a giant pile, throw them in the dirt, and throw them away. So all that food, like potatoes, and that's just an example, all of that would go to waste. And so why rely on that type of industry for your food supply when leftism in America specifically has started with the farmers, has started with labor? So that's one component we're missing. So we could, I talked about this on my show with my man Q about how to grow your own garden. I mean, it's very simple. You can do it in a storage tub. And I think if we as a community get better in terms of finding a piece of land and growing our own food instead of relying on all these big industries for our supplies, I think that'd be very good. So that's a solution we could do.
Yeah, we definitely should be implementing growing our own food more to these programs, because these industries are also poisoning us because of how much they adulterate the food, like all the unnecessary chemical compounds that are put into the food to make it taste better, to make us feel addicted, because when we eat the food, it triggers the pleasure system of our brain instead of the what's it called, just making us feel the part of our brain that lets us know when we're full. This is what these corporations do. Again, when it's profit over people, they don't care about our safety. So yeah, we really need to implement into the programs on about how to grow our own food, how to form permacultures, have classes on how we can grow our own foods, and then we can trade different foods among different communities. Skeptical and Fuzz, do you guys have anything else to add on?
Yeah, I think the main idea here is figuring out how these mutual aid programs could lead to independence from the system and sovereignty, where we could basically start forming dual power, start forming our own power that's separate from the capitalist government. That's a big step towards revolution. Once you can have a group that's actually carrying out government functions potentially better than the government itself, and people start to see that as legitimate, that's how you start building towards revolution. I want to just add, beyond all the material aid and mutual aid programs that the Panthers did, they did some pretty interesting stuff, even just like community conflict resolution, dealing with local issues between individuals that had sparked into violence, local beefs, gang wars, like they try to organize gang truces and shit like that. Even just like stuff with domestic violence, they would respond to domestic violence calls and like try to settle things, keep an eye on things. Their activities were very, very far reaching.
Yeah, and their education programs too. We with the internet now, that can facilitate things, because our education system, like we discussed earlier, is really taught to just it teaches kids how to be more so obedient servers of society, for these capitalists as opposed to teaching them how to think critically and how to be more creative. Um, I think that this is severe. These discussions about solutions is severely lacking in independent media. So what kind of other things that the Black Panthers did do you think that independent media should be covering more?
I want to say that people in independent media, this is to expand a little bit more on what I said about simplifying uh, people down to icons like Fred Hampton being associated with the Free Breakfast Program and community and Newton as a community organizer. That there is something that we. Sorry, I forgot where I was heading with the point. Never mind.
I'm thinking that beyond praising what they did right, there's a lot to praise in my opinion, and a lot to admire about what the Black Panthers did. A lot of the studies that we've been doing and a lot of the best Panther memoirs, to be honest, are very self-critical. The ones who come off as just like celebrating themselves without like explaining why they ultimately failed, those are like the worst memoirs in my opinion. The ones that are like, damn, we did this and this and this and it led to these problems, and it's more like breaking it down. That's more like how you learn the lessons of things, I think sometimes that's a problem too with, like Fuzz was saying, breaking people down into icons. It's like criticizing them can be so taboo.
Yeah, I was trying to find the right words to say how to dodge a cult of personality like the Black Panther Party without sounding so harsh. But yeah, you mostly said it.
I mean, if we're praising and we're emulating some of their programs, I think it's all right to still constructively criticize some of the things that went wrong with them. It's something that you guys discussed in the study group, is how some of the ways that they failed is creating a cult of personality, and we see that also similarly across other revolutionary groups in other countries. Like one of the downfalls is relying too much on a leader. What would you like to see covered more in independent media regarding Black Panther history, RJ?
In general, let's just get to the step of actually talking about it. I mean, do any of them talk about it? So let alone have a certain issue. So, I mean, just like with any organization in general, there are things that you can really learn from, especially whether it's good or bad. And I think we should discuss about it. I mean, there's a lot of talk too about the failures of the Justice Democrats, but in general too, we need to actually talk about how the left can prepare for an organization like that to capitulate so that we can defend ourselves against them. Because we spend all our energy putting money, time, giving them strategies, when in the end it's not necessarily working. So to your point about the Black Panthers Party, in ways they did have some successes, but in terms of the shortfalls, just like my man said, I do believe we should eventually talk about it more, because that's how we grow, that's how we learn, So instead of just pretending things didn't really happen, I think it's important to talk about it so in the future we won't repeat the same problem.
Yeah.
Like something I personally found wrong with Huey Newton's circle of the party is how multiple accounts point to him as being the sole writer of the 10-point program, when this is something that every top level Panther from the executive committee to the lowest in training, they had to memorize it in their sleep. And there wasn't enough heads available to include their own opinions on what a party program should look like. And I think it's a fair thing to say that MPP, the Movement for People's Party, is following the same routes in keeping the leadership so close-lit from everything that Franco has been talking about in relation to that party. So that's kind of a trend that's likely to continue. Something else that's not talked about a lot is how much Huey Newton was not obsessed, but how much of his thought mentality circled around the US law when the Milford Act should have been the biggest sign of foreshadowing that the state's gloves are about to take their gloves off and they're not going to care
Just real quick,
about
explain what the Milford Act was. RJ referenced it earlier without using the name, but it was the Panther bill. Can you just explain that a bit?
Yeah, the Milford Act was supposed to basically curtail the Second Amendment and prevent the Black Panthers from exercising the ability to cop watch by open carrying. And this is a thing to note about because every Panther is instructed for them to go cop watch to have a tape recorder, a law book, and a gun on hand. So they were playing around, they were using rules that were ready to be broken at any time. And I personally think that's a severe misunderstanding of how far the state was willing to go, and they didn't take that into account. That it should be learned from going forward.
Yeah, Mumia Abu Jamal actually criticized this in his book, We Want Freedom. He's still in jail, by the way. Shout out to Mumia, free Mumia. But he was talking about how they had a legalistic attitude, and a lot of it initially came from Huey. And I guess a lot of the discussion of early Panther history is about, I don't know, people are kind of like bragging about how much they stayed within the law. But ultimately, like Fuzz said, the law can just be changed to work against you because that's how it's designed, you know?
Yeah, I'm curious, RJ. What are your thoughts on how much we should be working with like third parties and electoral politics in general? What are your thoughts on like MPP and stuff? Do you see that as any route forward? Like, should we be focusing our energy to try to strengthen that?
Currently no. Like I'm not in terms of like MVP or of course I believe we should probably have third parties, but I do believe that if we focus on really unions right now, as well as working with our more grassroots instead of electoral politics, it could be to our benefit using that type of outside pressure. I think we play a dangerous game as leftists in general when we try to invest in electoral politics a lot, because we've seen what happened really in 2016. They'll change the rules. Just like my man said with the Black Panthers Party, they were following the law, open carry, and then Ronald Reagan said, we don't follow the rules, you have to. So it's the same thing in 2016 where the super delegates all came together and crushed Bernie. I mean, they all voted before the election happened. Then after it happened, basically Bernie lost. I mean, kind of really, the establishment would never really follow the rules. So we have to kind of force them to do shit that they normally wouldn't do otherwise. And so to me, electoral politics is kind of like, okay, here's the set of, we have to play a rigged game that we know the outcome. And so, of course, sometimes it has its benefits, don't get me wrong, but I'm just divesting personally. I'm still watching the news to see what happens, of course, but I just don't think it's really a positive outlook that we should spend a lot of time on the left right now.
Yeah, and they're gonna keep changing the rules around. Like these elections are privately owned. These corporations they're gonna see third parties as a threat, especially ones that are not co-opted, and haven't been there for years, and they know is not really a threat. Like the Green Party and Libertarian Party have been there for years, but haven't really caused much of a threat to the two major puppet parties. And also, is there any, like, how much energy did the Black Panther Party focus on electoral politics? That wasn't even their main focus, right?
No, it was not their main focus.
And what was the reason? Like, what did they see? Like, why?
Initially, well, in the second year of their existence, 1968, Eldridge Cleaver actually ran for president as part of the Peace and Freedom Party. But from my understanding, he was just using the electoral system to discredit the entire system. Like, he didn't really try to win necessarily. He didn't think he was going to win. He was using it to just show how everything was a huge circus. He was going around saying, fuck Ronald Reagan. He had people chanting, fuck Ronald Reagan, who was the governor at that time. He was basically just going out talking mad shit and using it as PR in a way. Whereas later on after the 1971 split, around 1972 or 73, Huey Newton's faction of the party actually did engage with electoral politics quite extensively. And I think it was a huge mistake, and it just showed how reformist they had become. And at one point, Elaine Brown, which was one of Huey's main leaders, she actually became very close with the Democratic Party in California. And she admitted that she wasn't even trying to fight for revolution anymore. She said that towards the end of her book, the book about her life. It's the only one, but I forget what it's called right now.
I think, using it just to expose how corrupt it is and how really impossible it is for a third party to succeed is a good way to show people and educate people about how corrupt and privately owned our system is. And just like talk about it the whole entire time and expose people like that. That's something that MPP could use, but I don't think they will, because I think that they're really in disbelief that they could actually create a big enough support around them to defeat the Democrats and the Republicans. But yeah, that's the only way I can see like it being productive and worthwhile. If the whole time you're just exposing everything, exposing corruption, exposing the billionaires who fund all the politicians in the two major parties, exposing how the Green and Libertarian Party are really just there just to be there pretty much. I've gone in detail about the Green Party and Howie Hawkins and how they're just pretty much just there as like a hangout. If they really wanted to win, they would actually would have put in an effort a long time ago, and would have organized locally. But I mean, they're not interested in that. Jack Sith asked a great question here. He asked what was the downfall of the Rainbow Coalition of the Black Panther Party, and this is for any of you guys who wants to jump in and answer that.
Frail whites.
Frail whites.
Yeah, they didn't stuck around to make any sort of coalition worthwhile. Essentially, the first sign of police oppression, they said, yeah, we're out. At least that's how I read most of that history of the Rainbow Coalition be summed up. I don't know if Mac has anything different.
Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't exactly put it that way. Frail whites, yeah, I agree with that part. That was a big problem with the Panthers trying to work with white groups and having too much faith in them in general without them having proven themselves, because many of these white leftist groups became de-radicalized when the draft was ended and they were no longer threatened with being sent to Vietnam. But with the Rainbow Coalition specifically, I think there's more like a detailed history that I don't know if we can go into right now, but that was like specifically in Chicago and stuff like that. I wouldn't say that they basically quit at the first sign of police repression. I would say that I couldn't find much or any information about the Young Patriots leaders and like a lot of those white leftist leaders at those times that worked with Fred Hampton. I couldn't really find much information about their political work after the 70s. I know some of them have re-emerged into political life recently. I think there's a guy called Hy Thurman, and probably a few others who have gotten involved like in the last few years, but there's like a huge gap where I didn't see any political involvement from them. At least I didn't find it. As far as why did the Rainbow Coalition fail, I think in the early years of the Panthers, Huey, Eldridge, a lot of their rhetoric was very optimistic about the white working class, like being rapidly awakened. You know, it probably seemed that way at the time. I don't blame them for thinking that. But Huey later concluded after the split that the white radicals didn't really have any influence in their own community. And so they were in a strange position where they had all these white radicals who they couldn't really bring into the Black community. And they also couldn't really do much in the white community. So it was like a weird alliance that didn't really amount to too much in the longer term.
Yeah, RJ, you can add on like what your thoughts to what Fuzz and Skeptical said.
I think in general they made some pretty good points. I think in also too, there's really like a pretty big disconnect really between in America, race and class really kind of confines the whole system. So like in general, if you do agree that you have certain class interests that you want to fix and have, the problem is America has also a racial system as well, which acts as a stopgate for progress. So even even after the 60s as well, different states will have different arbitrary rules excluding minorities and people of color from having certain rights and abilities. And so even if you do have like certain reformist programs that could make a community better, a lot of people of color were excluded and really didn't receive a lot of those benefits. So it'll be beneficial for the white working class, but not necessarily for those people of color. And so I think that's kind of the problem that we should fix.
So I just want to, oh yeah, go ahead, Skeptical, if you want to say something.
Yeah, can I just clarify real quick that Huey Newton's statement about the white radicals not having influence on the white community, that was more a reference to SDS and other white leftists. I don't think that really applied to the whites in the Rainbow Coalition from like the Young Party, and there was another group called Rising Up Angry. From my understanding, the Chicago Rainbow Coalition did include more like working class whites than many of the other whites who were in SDS. They were like more middle class. And I do think the Rising Up Angry group was also like a little more middle class. But I think the main reason the Chicago Rainbow Coalition fell apart was like a messianic attitude about like being too reliant on Fred Hampton. And a lot of people don't know. I didn't know until I started looking into the details. Apparently, there's another guy named Bob Lee, who was actually the main organizer of the Rainbow Coalition. And Fred Hampton was more like the public face and more like, in some ways, he seems, from what I've studied, he seems a bit more like a motivational speaker more than a revolutionary strategist. And I think that was kind of a problem. And when Fred was killed, like, they never really bounced back from that. I think in general, the Panthers had a tendency to put too much weight on individual leaders. The FBI documents specifically said they wanted to stop the rise of a Black Messiah. And maybe looking back at the history, we could think, what if we didn't try to have a Messiah at all? What if we just try to develop like collective leadership, where if any individual gets taken out, we can still continue, right? People die every day. People get arrested all the time. Individuals are very fragile. Organizations can't be so dependent on individuals.
I just want to.
Yeah, that reminds me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to include that this reminds me a little bit of when Huey was in prison, and I think it was Eldridge Cleaver that was responsible for trying to hire Kwame Ture as the prime minister in the meantime to just like have a notable figurehead that's there to try to keep things together. And ultimately that didn't end up working out. But to your point, that furthers the case for like more collective leadership, and then instead of referring to like icons or famous people and whatnot. Yeah,
I just want to play this clip real quick that Jack Sitz sent about the Black Panther Party distributing free groceries. Let me zoom out here for people to see. But yeah, after this I'll ask the final question, and then yeah, we'll wrap up.
Well,
let me just adjust the audio here so that my panel can also hear. Working with some cheap tech here.
All these groceries, way over 6,000 bags of groceries, being given away free. Tomorrow night, the Black Panther Party has organized the whole conference, and tomorrow night at the Oakland Auditorium, that's Wednesday, tomorrow night at 6 p.m., we expect way over 6,000 people. to come down and get their free bags of groceries, and also to register to vote, to unify the vote around the very concrete program, so that in the future the black community and other poor oppressed people in any kind of vote will be unified around concrete survival programs like this, so that people won't be asked by the politicians to endorse them, but the politicians will have to endorse people's community survival program, such as free food, because people got to eat every day.
This is a new approach for the Black Panther Party, isn't it?
It's not per se a new approach. It's some new kind of work. It's all related to our original vision of the Black Panther Party over 6 years ago. You see, the Black Panther Party organizing this kind of operation really shows that we're implementing the original vision of the Black Panther Party.
There are a lot of grocery items still to be put into these bags, the biggest one being a fresh chicken. That'll be put in at the last minute tomorrow. The Black Panthers estimate that the value of each of these grocery bags is in excess of $10. Ed Arno for Eyewitness News in Oakland.
So yeah, that's pretty much just showing some of what the Black Panther Party would do. There's some footage of that I just wanted to show. Any final comments regarding this topic here? And I wanna ask the final question if you guys have time. If not, then we can make this the final question. We have time for just one more topic, RJ, after this, or is this it?
We can do one more.
All right, cool. But yeah, final thoughts on this.
You can go ahead.
What's the final topic? I'm curious what's the final topic. So I want to know if I want to say something on this or the final, whatever the next thing is.
The final topic is what are some shortcomings and blind spots of the white left, which makes it hard to unite with them?
Okay, cool. I think before I address that, I would want to say a little bit more on the topic we're on. Just that whole discussion of the Panther bill, the Milford Act, and how they outlawed open carry just made me think, and the whole issue with like election rigging, everything you do within the system, everything that's within the legal system will be used by the powerful against the working class. So this is something I've been saying for a long time. Revolution is illegal by definition. Like, I'm not saying go out there and do something illegal, but you have to understand that at a certain point, any movement that can challenge the power structure, even if it's totally peaceful, like Martin Luther King, you will be treated as a criminal. You will either be explicitly criminalized, right? They'll change laws to outlaw what you're doing, or they could try to get you on some BS, any kind of thing, tax evasion, whatever it might be. They'll find ways to get you, or they could just assassinate you. There's so many ways. You'll be treated as a criminal. Revolution itself is illegal by definition. So we need to break out of that legalistic mentality that, some Panthers had and many progressives currently have. Also, can I say one thing about MPP? For a long time, I took a wait and see attitude about MPP. I thought that maybe it could go along with a grassroots rebellion and it could just be one thing, doing their electoral thing that could complement a more grassroots rebellion. But after seeing the way that Nick Brana and the leadership handled or mishandled the situation with petitioners, over 200 of their volunteers were calling for internal reforms, democratic processes, transparency, basic stuff that a people's party should have. Instead, it seems like the whole thing is controlled by an unelected leadership. And the way that Nick Brana and Annalise Garcia handled it just made me lose respect for them and think they're very dishonest. I don't trust them. I think MPP is doomed. Like before, I thought it had a little bit of potential, but honestly, nah, I think it's just sucking up energy from our movement. People like Jimmy Dore, people like Christian Smalls, Justin Jackson, I think they're good people, but I really hope they can either somehow like make a huge move where they can either replace Nick Brana or do something to fix the People's Party. Otherwise, it's doomed. I really think it's probably like too late, honestly, because Jimmy Dore doesn't really seem involved in the process at all. He's just like allowing himself to be a figurehead. And that's going back to Fuzz's point about like how the Panthers had like this celebrity politics where they kind of always tried to have like a visible figurehead. I don't know. I think MPP is doing the same
you got a
thing. It's very
point.
celebrity oriented.
Yeah, you got a point, and I want to ask RJ about this. Do you think that there's a lot of leftists that still put a lot of apply this like celebrity culture to independent media or some of these figures like Nick Brana and Jimmy Dore? I gave some criticisms here on this channel, some constructive criticism about Jimmy Dore. Before he even came on this channel, I was talking about I mean, he needs to look more into what's going on with MPP and these petitioners, how this is going to be doomed to fail because they're not turning the world upside down like they need to. They're considering everything that's going on right now with the pandemic. Like they should be leading with all these protests that are happening across the country. They should be trying to generate a general strike a general strike to happen. But it seems like they're just like waiting around until 2024 happens. And I'm afraid people are going to waste their time until 2024 only for them to realize, oh man, we wasted all our time just waiting around for thinking that that a third party like MPP was going to save us. That was a mistake that I made in going into 2016. I mean, going into 2020, like from 2016 to 2020, I was like, hey, yeah, I know Bernie's going to run again. And he's going to have he has more momentum this time. Like there's more people that are going to be backing him. We're going to overwhelm the system. All these people are going to vote for him. And then we know what happened. Bernie turned into a cuck. So do you see this as like a problem for a lot of people on the left? Like, is this specifically just a white leftist problem, or do you think that a lot of minorities also suffer from this celebrity worshiping of people?
Yeah, I mean, celebrity worship is kind of a problem. Really, in the Black community, the first politicians we had celebrity love was Kennedy, then it was Clinton, Bill Clinton. He was and Obama said he was the first Black president. That's hilarious. Then it was Obama. So I mean, in the Black community in general, those are the ones we kind of deify because, well, those are the ones we kind of idolize. There we go. That's a better word for that. And I guess in terms of like what was mentioned about MPP, I think in general we have to really have conversations about all these left political organizations. Really the big ones in terms of like national DSA, we should have a conversation about MPP national, because a lot of times they're really created to really funnel people in there. And then when the people on the ground who are the organizers for, the city DSA or state or city MPP or whatever, they do great work. They're doing all the work organizing people, political education and advocating for policies, doing protests. But when it's time to have a national party back you to really put all those things into law in your own states and cities, a lot of times they're stopgates. They're not actually bringing about that type of change. And I believe even if you're in those organizations, it's really your duty to call them out on that. So I love seeing those organizers and activists who are honest and inside those organizations call them out, because that's the only way they're going to listen to you. Like if they're just going to say, hey, handle this internally, attend our meetings, yeah, okay. You're falling into their hands. That's like a Democratic voter going to really the DNC chairman, Jamie Harrison, saying, hey, work with us on the inside, stay quiet, things get better. No, that's not how it works. Yeah. So you have to agitate and persist. And so that's the only way we leftists are going to really attain power and really be more smart with it. Because originally MPP was thought of, okay, well, we have green, they're good in terms of individual states. You have DSA, which is pretty good locally, but maybe we need something federally. But the problem is that I feel like MPP wanted to start things off top heavy, and then hey, organizers, you do what we say, which is pretty messed up. It's the complete opposite in terms of how you build a movement. Like DSA is very good in terms of city. Like I've attended Detroit DSA meetings. I mean, they're trying right now to elect a guy for the police commission. He'll be the first citizen non-cop to be elected. So I think that's pretty good to have people in that are citizens on the police board so that they can review things for police conduct. Because police and cops are just going to cover for each other. So that's one good instance to which local DSA can do. In terms of the Green Party statewide, I mean, they've done some good work depending on your state to bring about leftist change as well. But I'm not really sure what MPP brings to the table besides funneling people in there. And one thing I've heard that really pissed a lot of people off is that all those organizations like DSA and as well as the Green Party, they're honest that they're leftist. But the problem with MPP is that they put out a statement that they got ratioed for on Twitter saying, oh, well, we're not leftist, we're going to have conservatives, whatever in here. And it's like, okay, so how does that make you different than anyone else? And how is that going to bring about leftist change? So it seems like to me, they're just willing to have anybody inside their party, which is heavily problematic because you're supposed to all have a common goal in an organization to bring about a change. And I think that leads into my episode I did with EQ about having a litmus test for an organization. I mean, the capitalists have a litmus test. You're for socialism, you're kicked out. You have to be a capitalist. I think for leftists, we should have that same litmus test of who the fuck we let in, because we can't let someone co-opt us from the inside and destroy what we're trying to do. So I know I went on a long tangent, but that's
no, all what you said is important. Yeah, we do need a litmus test. You brought up excellent points about like what exactly is MPP bringing to the table. Like, are they really good at the federal level? Fuzz and Skeptical, what do you guys think about like the downfalls in the left of too much idealization, not enough? People get carried away with this, right? They don't do enough of litmus tests on people. Something that I can remember recently is a lot of leftists were celebrating Ed Markey just because he teamed up with AOC and the Green and his support for the Green New Deal, as if that's enough. Not looking at his background and how he's a corporatist and the author of the '96 Telecom Act. There's too much hope that people put on other people to solve the problems for them. They're not putting that energy onto themselves to take action.
Just real quick, can I comment on something RJ said that I found interesting about, he was saying how MPP claims like they're not leftist or like they're trying to play this kind of game where they're avoiding the leftist label. I think it's partially based on a very simplistic misunderstanding of Fred Hampton's history too, because I seen that Jimmy Dore tries to invoke Fred Hampton to push the idea of working with racists. And it's really a half-truth that the Rainbow Coalition worked with racists. I've made videos like detailing that. I don't want to get into it too much right now, but a lot of those white people were involved in SDS previous to the Rainbow Coalition. So it's very unlikely they would have been open bigots. Yes, some of them wore Confederate flags, but they also saw it as a sign of rebellion against the government. And nonetheless, they wanted to work with Black people, whereas the KKK existed in Chicago, and it's not like Fred Hampton worked with them, quite the opposite. I really wish Jimmy Dore would learn more about the Black Panther Party. I love that dude. I got a soft spot in my heart for him, but I hate to see him twisting the history, and I've had to criticize him quite a few times over it. And really, I blame Chris Hedges, because I think Chris Hedges is in his ear, and Jimmy thinks, oh, well, this guy's smart, so he just listens to Chris Hedges.
He idolizes him a lot. It's a failure among some of the people that other people idolize. Like, people idolize Jimmy Dore so much, and then Jimmy Dore idolizes Chris Hedges and what's his name, Thomas Frank a lot. And there's not enough criticism among our idols, I think.
And then Jimmy doesn't bring on people who are actually like really knowledgeable about Black Panther history. He could actually tell more. Jimmy doesn't have to be an expert, but he could at least have people on his show who know more or can give a different perspective than Chris Hedges.
Yeah. Fuzz, what are your thoughts?
So when it comes to failures of the white left, I want to say that a lot of it comes from the commentator's side, and we all like to bash TYT for a reason, but we need to because they're an original source of a trend that they themselves wanted to bring in mainstream media into YouTube, and that's how they wanted to start their own thing. But then a second wave of content creators like David Dole, Mike Figueredo, Tim Black, Sam Cedar, they all wanted to follow the TYT model, which is a mainstream model, and just stick to being commentators and sticking to gaining clicks instead of properly informing people using their platforms. I'd say that's one aspect of failure where they're too much of a coward to not even discuss Assange. For starters, some people just refuse to outright cover Assange for censorship reasons, but people who are pro Assange don't take into account Mumia Abu Jamal and other political prisoners like him. And there could only be something like the Assange phenomena of international extradition on journalists being possible because there have been a whole bunch of precedents setting in cases of multiple people like political prisoners like Mumia who are ignored, and as a result everybody is just stuck on the international scene instead of looking domestically at the earlier political prisoners that were ignored.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, not enough talk about Mumia. Yeah, the copying the mainstream model also that these people do. I'm trying to do something unique here, and I'm trying to talk about issues that a lot of the more popular independent media people aren't talking about enough. Like for example, what we just talked about with what's going on in Colombia. Like more like we need to talk about foreign policy as much as we can. Talking about Black Panther history and how we can use some of their programs and implement them to some of the solutions for today, and how we can incorporate other things like growing our own food, implementing cryptocurrency in some way, and opting out of the system in that way. I don't hear that discussed enough among the popular leftist independent media. I don't know how much of that has to do with like elitism among them. Because if you think about the TYT crowd, the Brooklyn left crowd, which includes Sam Cedar and some and now what's her name, Emma Vigilant, who used to be a part of TYT, Michael Brooks, who used to be a part of it, and R.I.P. to him. And now we have people like Mike Figueredo, David Dole. What a lot of these people have in common, and I'm gonna throw Kyle Kalinske in there too. These people, most of them are white, and a lot of them seems like they didn't grow up with as much struggle as the majority of the country grew up, and especially the minority portion of the country. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think there's a certain kind of maybe psychological profile. I'm not a psychologist, I don't know, I'm speculating, but there's a certain kind of mindset or person that gets into independent media. Not all of us are the same necessarily. We all have different motivations, but it can often attract like certain narcissistic people who love the sound of their own voice, and they're either middle class or upper class, probably highly educated. Doesn't necessarily mean they're smart, but they feel that they're very smart. They feel that they're in the position to talk about all this shit. And then once they start making a lot of money off it too, forget about it. They're never going to challenge the system, because that wasn't their goal in the beginning. And now they're basically grifters. I know the word grifter is thrown around so casually, but honestly, these people are professional complainers, and I hate that.
They make money off of talking about the same topics. And talking about electoral politics. Still to this day, they don't bring on like new guests that are doing great work exposing a lot of the corruption which runs really deep. Like when's the last time that any of them have brought on someone like Whitney Webb, or other people that explore the deep state? But yeah, RJ, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts in general, like people like Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, as well, is that I mean I'm not surprised, and we shouldn't be surprised. They're reformists. They want to do really the more comfortable route of really changing the system of the state instead of actually abolishing it and creating something out of it new. So that's why even of course, when Trump was president, it was extremely easy to be a reformist because that was the narrative. I mean, people wanted to care about working class people, all these issues. It's very easy under Trump. But even now under Biden, you see that they're accepting less and less and less and making all these bogus arguments about what is to be expected or what you could have got under Biden when you know the previous history. And that's them trying to be optimistic. So to me, the problem is they use optimism as a way of cover to slowly accept the non-existent policy concessions that we are going to get. But I feel like they should be more pessimistic due to their big platforms that they have. And it's almost like you're sheep herding people into believing something that's probably not going to happen and come true. So that's my problem with individuals like that and like TYT, because in general, they want to make money. They want to pay their bills too. So it makes it very difficult. That's why I feel like independent media as well, those who don't rely on those different type of industries. And of course they have special benefits, like The Hill sponsors Crystal Ball and their show. They have like some big corporation guy who, gives them, they have the good algorithm on YouTube. So not everyone has that. I mean, you see what happens with Status Quo. They do great work. They get struck down every day. So it's so terrible what's going on with independent media. I just feel like those on a bigger platform have a bigger obligation to really put out good news and to do better journalism. Because in the end, they're the ones that are going to bring about the big reach. That's why I'm very worried about any leftist who comes and tells me they watch TYT. I'm like, no, don't do it. I mean, I've had friends who told me about MPP. I joined 2 weeks and they hit me up and they said, hey, you might not want to do this. I'm like, wow, okay, thanks. So we should warn our brothers and sisters. Yeah. So we should warn our brothers and sisters about these really what I call the left establishment now. That's what they are. They're the left establishment. They're going to be the gatekeepers telling the more radical ones, hey, you're too crazy. This is what's to be expected. We're the ones going to be pushing them. And the more establishment of those are like the Squad and the House Progressives. They're our establishment now. We thought we were going to use them to fight the establishment. No, they're the left establishment. We have to fight them to get to the Democrats. So that's how fucked things are. So that's why we have to stop relying on them and those big media lefty conglomerates, because they're only going to do what makes the Squad happy. I mean, it's evident. I mean, Cenk Uygur, TYT, they've been proven to defend the Squad during Force the Vote, even though it's the right thing. And then as soon as all the leverage is gone, oh, I'm burning my bridges. That was the most bullshit video from Cenk. Oh, God. So it just pissed me off. I stopped watching. I only watch if it's the clickbait stuff. Like, I haven't watched TYT in like 3 years. Crystal Ball show. Sometimes, to be honest, because whatever clickbait stuff they have, but
it's really
I rarely watch that stuff. I agree.
Yeah. So like they're going to attract a certain kind of people, I think, that are going to be reformists, like the audience members that watch these channels, and I think some of them get stuck and they think that this is the best that we have. So they don't know about other solutions out there that exist. I think that it is worth still, we can have people that go into their chats every now and then, some of the audience members, and I know some of you guys do this, and I thank you guys, and give links to these other leftist channels and try to ease people in, and then they're presented to new ideas we never thought of before. He's like, hey, have you checked out Fred Hampton Leftist? Have you checked out Frank Analysis? Skeptical Mantis Channel 10? Have you checked out Slow News Day? Have you checked out Combo Couch? So yeah, Skeptical and Fuzz, how worth it do you think it is to unite with these audience members? Like, is it too hopeless, or do you think that there's still some hope in trying to get these audience members to get more radicalized and see that maybe reformism isn't the best way forward?
Well, I think the audience members mostly have a lot of potential. Most of them.
Yeah.
Some people are just into politics just because it's like a hobby or something, and they don't actually really care that much about seeing things change. It's more like watching a soap opera or something for some of these people. But I think a lot of the audience members have potential. The ones who really just piss me off are the grifters who are making a career complaining, doing clickbaity little stories, cheerleading Bernie and AOC. I hate all that crap. And they're really not interested in fighting at all. Yeah, they become obstacles. The Black Panther Party actually talked about endorsed spokesman of the system. That's the term they use. I made a video comparing AOC to how they describe the endorsed spokesman of the system. Basically, they're like leaders that have been approved by the ruling class, like basically controlled opposition. And that's what a lot of these media commentators are too. They're controlled opposition. Whether they know it or not, they're serving the system.
Like Kyle and Crystal giving praise to the Biden administration, like, hey, they're not doing so bad.
He's gonna pull. He might pull troops out of Afghanistan. Like, oh, he might do. He's saying all the right things. Just stop. Like, Unapologetic had a great video taking down Kyle and Crystal for that shit. Like, they feel like they have to be neutral about criticizing Biden. No, just fully expose that shit. Like, we don't have time to be fair to these corporatists, imperialists that are killing us. There's no freaking time for that. There's no freaking time for that. They deserve no compliment whatsoever.
Even the progressive media commentators who are well-meaning, some of them are well-meaning, but like they're not all. Hold up, they're not all consciously like total grifters. Like, but at the end of the day. Damn, I kind of forgot my point.
At the end of the day, like, what do we have to do with like the audience members?
Oh, the audience members. Yeah, we should engage with them. I think some of these progressive commentators could be like a stepping stone to becoming more
gateway,
farther
right?
left. Yeah, hopefully.
Just want to read this final Super Ray from Proletariat. Thank you very much. So we also got go to focus on the movement and press freedom issues, like press and solidarity. With poverty, oppression, and working class struggles, the most effective use of the time is proposing solutions and spreading education. And that's why I admire Fred Hampton leftists, because they actually do talk about solutions. They try to unite with people. They had all these other commentators on, like Unapologetic, Justin Jackson, Sevi Sabs. So yeah, you guys are doing great work over there, RJ. You have any final words before we close off the stream here?
Just tune into Fred Hampton Leftist. We have our Twitter account at Fred Hampton Leftist. If you have any topic requests for us, please shoot us a DM in our FHL chat. Also, too, just for anyone who wants to come on my show, you can DM me at Comrade Curls. I love journalists, I love writers, because what I'll do on my show is that if there's a topic I want to have you on, bring your article. I'll basically shout out your Substack. That's what I did with my friend EQ. He calls himself the Practical Anarchist. He writes many different articles. His Substack is Earthquake Photos. He breaks down left movement building, anarchism. So yeah, it's pretty great. So that's stuff that we should all check out.
Mm-hmm. And Fuzz and Skeptical, any final words?
No, just glad to have been able to come on. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope to have a talk with RJ in the future, or at least see him on the show again soon.
Yeah, this was a cool talk. It was good talking with RJ. I'd like to talk with more of the Fred Hampton leftist people, especially digging deep to the Black Panther history. I think we could have a lot of great conversations. Can I just take a real quick minute to list off some of the names of relatively unknown political prisoners? It will only take a minute. It's off the Jericho Movement website. I'm not going to read all of them because there's quite a few, but I'm going to read some of the main ones that I recognize, many of them who are former Panthers, Black nationalists, indigenous nationalists, third world revolutionaries, far leftists, communists, etc. So, Free Mumia Abu Jamal, Free Sundiata Akoli, Free Jamil Al-Amin, also known as H-Rat Brown, one of the most well-known activists back in the days of SNCC in the 1960s. People don't know this man is not only still alive, he's been in prison since the early 2000s. Free Leonard Peltier, free David Gilbert. Give me a second, there's a few more. Free Rochelle McGee, one of the longest held political prisoners ever since the early 60s. I believe 1962.
Jeez.
He was locked up. Free Ed Poindexter, free Matula Shakur, free Russell Maroon Schultz. That's it. There's a few more on the Jericho Movement website. Please look into it, but those are the ones that I'm most familiar with. So, yo, free all my people. We need revolution.
RJ,
Free
Fuzz,
Palestine.
and Free Palestine. Yeah. RJ.
Down with U.S. imperialism.
Hell yeah. RJ, Fuzz, and Skeptical, I had a blast here. Thank you guys very much for the insight that you guys brought today. It was a real honor talking to you guys, and I look forward to talking to you guys more. To everybody else,
be invited.
stay informed.